Okay, this is a walkthrough video for the Excel lab part 2. Okay, so in part 2, the statement says that the main idea here is to plot the X and Y components of a force as the angle moves around a circle. So I wanted to show you real quickly what that would look like by drawing a quick sketch. Okay, so let me move over to my iPad. Okay, so on my iPad, I can pull that up. Here's the idea. We are looking at a force. Let me draw an axis here. We can represent a force, F, all right? And I think the length of this, if you measure this length of the force vector from here to here is 5, all right? And so, let me get rid of that because it's messing up the these things. All right, so eliminate that. All right, and now we assume that the angle that the force vector makes, according to this axis scheme, the 0-degree axis would be, or the x-axis would be the reference axis, and we go from here to here, and we call that the angle theta. Right, and we're trying to resolve this into a vertical force and a horizontal force. So let me draw the horizontal force this way. Okay, so we project this down, and we get Fx. Okay, and then for the vertical force, we project the force in the vertical direction. Okay, so let me change the color to orange. Okay. So we get Fy. All right, and it's not hard to know the math on this. Based on the angle theta, we remember from trig that Fy should be the magnitude of the force, which in this case is 5, times the sine of the angle theta. Okay, so you need to be careful when you use transcendental functions like sine and cosine. Typically, the argument here needs to be radians unless you use a different name for that function, like in MATLAB. There's something called sine d. Let me spell that out. Sine d. The d on the end means the argument can be in degrees. Okay, so and we'll play around with see if Excel has something like that. I don't know enough for that. Okay, and then if I wanted Fx, that's just the magnitude of F times the cosine of theta. Okay, and so our idea here is to step this through various values of theta. Okay, so we want to look at what happens when theta is 0 all the way to 360. Of course, at some point, if I move F over into this axis, the length is still 5, but Fx then points back to the left, so Fx would be negative in that case, and Fy, which would be, Fx is right here, Fy is right here, breaking up into components, and both of those point in the negative direction, so you can get some negative numbers here too. All right, so that's an idea of what we're doing, all right? And let me switch this over to this screen. Okay, Excel figures. All right, so what's shown here is the overall goal of what we want this thing to look like in the end. Okay, so resize on my desktop. I'm not sure if you have yours. Okay. All right, so we want degrees here, and then we're going to have an Excel formula that converts, degrees are here. All right, so we put these values in, and then we want to convert all these to radians. And then from there, take the cosine and sine and get the different components. This is just a magnitude check that you can have at the end, or you can force this to read, read the magnitude. I don't see where that part's necessary, but you get the idea. All right, so from there, we're going to learn to insert a chart. And this chart is called a scatter chart. You would think it'd be called a line chart because you're going to connect this with lines. These points are connected lines. But that's a point of confusion with Excel. If you want to plot something that's X versus Y, typically what you're going to want is a scatter plot. All right, so let me switch screens again. Let's now open a blank Excel document, right, with nothing in it. Okay, so I'm going to start in column A, and I'm going to let you worry about the formatting, but I'm going to call this angle in degrees. You can format that however you like. Here. Let me make the view a little bigger too. Okay, angle in degrees, angle in radians. Then we want fx. Then we want fy. And then f total, well, that's what he called it in the pictures here. Magnitude of f is really what we're after. Okay, and then from there we'll insert the plot. Okay. All right, so I can double click this boundary here and then we'll center these up, but I don't want that close. So at that point, it probably was too soon to do that. So I spread that back out. You'll get an idea playing around with the formatting. That's what I recommend you do for these things, is play around with them, make sure they work. Okay, another tip is before you get too long, notice we didn't save anything. So after you've done a substantial amount of work, you probably want to start saving it. Okay, so I'm going to save this as walk through part 2. Okay, so hopefully everybody's with me. So from here, I need to create the angles, and we're doing this, I think it says in the problem statement, to do this in steps of 10 degrees. Okay, so I can do 0, and I can do 10. And one of the things that you will learn is once you have a pattern like this, you can start dragging this down. And notice what it did, it just filled in the pattern. Okay, steps of 10. Okay, so select two cells, pull on this little green dot, and I can just move this on down a certain number of rows. Okay, think about where it should be it. Okay, 360 degrees. I knew I had a couple of rows that were used for labels, and so I stopped at 38 to get 360. If you went too far, you would just, if I went too far, I just can put space or clear or whatever, get rid of those. All right, so that's the angle in degrees. Next, we're going to start to use formulas, and we talked about the way that Excel will move formulas when you cut and paste them. All right, so for now, what we're going to do is we know that the conversion factor between degrees and radians is pi over 180. So I take the degrees right here, bonk, all right? It helps to add the same thing. Okay, A2 times, okay, Excel has a built-in function called pi, so I don't have to write out that number, okay? So it does take open parentheses and close parentheses to get this pi function to work. Okay, it doesn't take anything inside the parentheses, but that will give you the pi. Pi, and then we divide by 180, hit return. We know that 0 degrees is the same thing as 0 radians. Okay, so from here, I can then copy this, and I can copy it by just dragging that down. All right. Another thing I can do is I can do Control-C, or I'm going to right-click, copy, and then select all this. I held the Shift key down and hit square B38. Then I right-click and paste. Okay, so that converted all those to radians. Okay, and so notice what happens when you look at this formula bar. Here, this is A2, which I pasted in. No surprise there, I pasted that in, that's what I expected. When I move down, that incremented the 3, right? I'm still in column B, but this is now A3. So Excel read your mind, predicted, it's set up, however you want to do that. It's set up to do that type of index change when you paste things across cells, all right? We're going to talk about later in another video, what do you do to make it stop that if that's not what you want? Okay, so now we've got angle and we've got to paste in the formula for fx, okay? And so one thing you could do is you could call this f mag, right? And we'll make that 5. And let's just go ahead and talk about what you do if you don't want to change that index. All right, so what we can do is say, well, I know the magnitude is supposed to be 5, and we're going to always draw that from cell F2, okay? So you can use a $sign to tell it, don't increment the row if I move this across columns. Don't increment the column if I move this across rows, okay? So I'm going to put $F, $2, and that tells me draw from this, and no matter what, don't change this from $F, $2. All right, so I'm not changing the F and I'm not changing the 2. All right, this is what I mean in a second. Okay, times cosine of B2. Now I do want that to increment because I'm going to paste that down this column. Okay, so as I paste this down the column, it should increment the rows. All right, and so I push this down, copy that down, and I get this. Okay, so notice when I click in here, this formula, $F2, I'm sorry, $F, $2, that never incremented, but the B2 turned into B3. And here, $F, $2, B3 turns to B4. So it's incrementing the rows because I didn't put a $sign in that one. Okay. I didn't really need the $sign in front of the F because I'm moving down columns and it wouldn't, I'm not changing the column, the relative column position. So it would have been that right without the $sign, but you can play around with that. Okay. So, sorry about that. Let me do the same thing for Y. Okay, so $F, $2, because that's where I'm going from for the magnitude, times sine, okay, sine of E2, hit enter. Okay, so when I copy this down, that gives me the sine portion of this. Okay, so those are those numbers. And I can do a check on my work because I can take the first component, fx, and square it, plus the second component, fy, and square it, and then take the square root of everything. Right? So you notice how I inserted square root there, put the cells in parentheses. Okay, and so it should be that no matter what angle I use, when I break this down into components, the result is 5. Okay, too far. Right, so there we are so far. And one thing I could do here, and that's the cool thing about Excel, if I wanted to change this force magnitude, if I change that to 3, everything gets updated. And you get 3's here. Okay, so let's change that back to 5. Okay, next. What I need to do next is insert a chart. To insert a chart that gives you a plot of fx and versus theta and fy versus theta. Okay, so it takes me a while to figure these things out in Excel because I'm usually a MATLAB user when it comes to making charts and graphs and those kind of things. But you need to be able to figure this out, even if it means looking things up or looking at Googling YouTube videos on how to run Excel. All right, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to start inserting charts, and it's good to have a certain base knowledge. One of the things that I remember, because I've done this enough to remember, is that when you want to insert a chart that has a plot of um, basically an X versus a Y, and that's a scatter plot, not a line plot. You would think it makes lines, but that's true, but it's a scatter plot. All right, so you'll need to know that's actually an exam question. You know, when I ask how do you plot X versus Y in Excel, the answer is scatter plot. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to go to our menus where you can insert something. All right, so I hit insert. And again, this is Excel for a Mac, and it might look different on a Windows machine. But you look for these types of icons. This is giving you a bar chart, okay? This is some kind of pie chart or tree map or whatever. So we search through here and scatter plots, that's what we're looking for. Okay, so for scatter plot, I'm looking at putting both the data points and connecting them with lines. So I select this. I usually connect everything with straight lines and try to sample it close enough to where the straight lines give it a good look. All right, I think you could try this one as well, and it would probably work. All right, so well, before I do that, let me select my data, and so I'm going to put the data in here, and I'm going to select all the data. All right, it turns out I don't want to plot all the data, but I just wanted to show you what happens when you do that. Okay, so I select all the data, and then I go back to the insert menu, and then scatter plot. All right, so cool. It gives me a lot of things, and it gets me pretty close pretty quickly. All right, so I'm looking at this, and what I'm wanting is, I look at this index, it says X and Y, that's what I want, okay? And it looks like I've chosen the X-axis to be, you know, it's reading this first axis in purple. This shows you, it gives you a graphical representation of what it's doing. This purple shading shows you it's the X-axis, and the rest are the curves that are associated with the other columns of data, all right? So we don't want this column, because that's just converting degrees to radians. That's what this blue line is. And we also don't want this last column, okay, because that gives me the constant at the top. Now, you see, column B is between columns C and D, so it would have been hard to select, you know, just these three columns unless you are good at running the the selection tools in Excel. So I think it's easier just to select everything, put up the chart, and then you come here and you can hit delete and get rid of the ones you don't want. So I'm clicking on that, hit the delete button, it's gone. It gives me what I'm wanting. Okay, so that's the first tip. All right, the next tip is, and this is where I get fuzzy on Excel because I don't use it enough. And as you upgrade different versions of Excel and you work on a PC, which I sometimes do, and you work on a Mac, which I usually do, the menus often look a little bit different. And I also find YouTube a little frustrating because older versions of Excel have slightly different ways of handling the menus. So you just have to keep that in mind that, I found this video telling me how to do this thing on Excel. Maybe it's the wrong version of Excel, maybe it's for Windows, maybe it's for a Mac. You just have to keep that in mind and try to get the basic idea. Generally, if there's a menu choice, it works across all versions of Excel and all operating systems, either Mac or Windows. By that I mean insert, right? You look for insert and then you select the chart type. Okay, I think all versions of Excel are going to start giving you recommendations on what you want your chart to look like. Okay, so maybe you check one of these and see, is that the look I want? How about this? How about this? Okay, So you can check on those different types. And then there's also, on my version of Excel, there's a quick layout so you can try to get close. All right, so if I clicked on this, let me do that again. I went from, I think, here, and notice what happens. I get, if I choose that first option, I get a chart title and I get an axis labels. Okay, so I experiment with that and see if I can get close to what I'm wanting. Okay, but let's say, I couldn't find exactly what I want. So let's go back to here. You can add different chart elements from another menu. All right, it might be a different looking menu on your version of Excel, but let's say I wanted to add a chart element. I'm thinking, wouldn't it be nice if I had, let's see, I was thinking title, but primary, yeah, title of the horizontal axis. Okay, so I click that and you see that menu choice showing up. Okay, wouldn't it be nice if I had a chart title? So I could put this in different places. Maybe I want to put it above the chart. There we go. So you can still customize it. You can go to the quick layout, try to get close. Maybe that's what I would do, since this one looked really pretty close to what we want. And then from there, I can edit this title to what I want. I can edit this x-axis to what I want. Okay, so maybe this would be degrees or theta in degrees. All right, so you get the idea. You play around with this and get the look and feel that you want with your plot. Okay, so hopefully this walkthrough helps you, and you can put the answer to this problem on one of the tabs in your spreadsheet. So this might be your part 2 tab. You would append that together with your part 1 tab. So part 1, I don't have it with this spreadsheet, but you're going to want everything turned in together and just all the answers on different tabs. Okay, so that's it for that walkthrough. Let me know if you have any questions.